All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to get started so that we have enough time at the end for questions. My name is Youyou Duanmu. I'm one of the assistant professors and ultrasound researchers from Stanford. And I am facilitating this session on behalf of my two co-presenters, Dr. Bernard Chang, who is an associate professor and the Vice Chair of Research at Columbia, and then the mastermind of this entire session, Dr. Jody Vogel, who is an associate professor and the Vice Chair of Academic Affairs at Stanford. So we have a wonderful panel of program officers from all kinds of different backgrounds today, and I'm going to be introducing each of them, and then they will have the opportunity to say a couple words, and if they like, present a couple slides. We'll try to keep that to a tight 5 minutes or until Jody starts waving you down. And then we will open up to discussion for whoever wants to ask some questions for our program officers. So I'm just going to start with your left. Closest to me is Dr. Jeremy Brown, who is the director of the NIH Office of Emergency Care Research. Dr. Brown completed his medical degree from the University College Hospital Medical School in London before training in emergency medicine at Boston Medical Center. He was an attending physician at the Beth Israel Medical Center and instructor at Harvard Medical School before becoming faculty at George Washington University. During his tenure there, he served as research director in the emergency department, and in 2013, he moved to the NIH, where he serves as the director of the NIH Office of Emergency Care Research. In this capacity, he helps catalyze and coordinate emergency care research across the NIH, and he also represents the NIH in government efforts to improve emergency care. He's a project scientist for the Siren Emergency Care Research Network and is the medical officer for several other grants focused on emergency care. Thank you.
I'm going to stand here. I do not have slides, so that only makes me half an expert, because an expert is someone who comes from out of town with slides. I do come from out of town. I do not have slides, but we'll just have to have a conversation. So I wear sort of two hats at the NIH. The first, as you just heard, is I'm in this shop called the Office of Emergency Care Research, which was established 11 years ago by a group of very impressive emergency physicians who figured out that emergency medicine needs a voice at the NIH. We have since increased the emergency medicine representation at NIH by 100% because Dr. Dixon, from whom you will hear, joined recently, and she is now, as far as I know, the only other EM physician among the 18,000 people who work in extramural at NIH. So I'm going to split this up into two parts. So what does the office do? The office is here to help you. The office is here to help you as EM people, whether you're PhDs and you're affiliated with a department, whether you're a nurse practitioner, a physician, whatever it is, it's here to help you find the right fit. The people who set my office up set it up in such a way that it has no funds. So no, I cannot give you money, which is very weird because it's actually the only office of its kind that has no money. There's an Office of Research in Women's Health. There's an Office of Preventative Health. But anyway, this is what it is, so we just have to deal with it. So my job is basically to find other project officers and say, I have a really good person, she has a really good grant, and I need you to fund it. And that last sentence is often a little bit where the conversation ends, because even though NIH has approximately, $40 billion to give out, it has a lot of people to give that out to who have terrific things. So if you need help starting, feel free to reach out to me, and we can have it. If you don't know to whom to turn, if you don't, you try to reach out to a project officer and they didn't return your emails, they ghosted you. That's the right term, right? I think so, yeah. Then contact me. If you know these people, if you have a good relationship with them, if you've been already funded and then you've got to go again, I have no reason to become involved. I mean, I like to hear of the successes so I can share them, but you don't have to go through me at all. So I think if you do have a relationship, you know who to ask, you know what you're doing, go to that person. If you want me to become involved because you think I can help, that's what I'm here to do. Okay, so that's the big part of the job of emergency medicine. But the second part that I do, since every office has to be located somewhere, my office is located in the National Institute for Neurological Disorders and Stroke. So my office, just to be clear, my Office of Emergency Care Research is a trans-NIH office, right? It's not owned, as it were, by NINDS. It looks at everything. It talks about whatever comes in, whatever our business is, that's what it deals with. But it is physically located in, and I report to people from NINDS, which is actually a terrific thing, because Walter Koroshetz, who is the director of NINDS, the Neurological Disorders and Stroke Institute, is a huge fan of emergency medicine. His daughter is an EM resident or attending, I can't remember which, so that's really good. And he, probably a great disappointment to Walter that she didn't become a neurologist, but anyway, and he was the very first, he was the kind of the interim director. He did what I'm doing just to sort of a place name. It was really him to whom emergency medicine leaders went a decade ago and said, can you help us? So Walter is a very big friend of emergency medicine. He should really get some kind of award for emergency medicine. I mean that very seriously. But he's a big, big advocate for emergency medicine. So the fact that I'm in a neurological institute is good. Everyone, you know, it's good for emergency medicine. But my second job is really within the institute, to be a project officer within the Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. So that means that there are many trials in neurological stuff, and it's not only emergencies that I deal with. So it's a long story, but I am now the contact person for all neurological conditions for which there is no existing network. So if you want to study something in stroke, you go to StrokeNet. If you want to study something in the ER or pre-hospital area that's neurological, you go to Siren. If you want to come in and do a study on whether optical changes can influence the progression of Parkinson's disease, you have to come to me. And I'm an ER guy, so it's really kind of a fun conversation. My usual opening words are, so tell me about what this disease is exactly. I'm afraid I don't, it's been a long time. So if you have a disease that is in the emergency medicine space of neurology, I can help you with two things. I can help you because Siren, and I can help you because I'm a neurologist. I do that as my second job. Is that clear? If you have a disease that's nothing to do with emergencies, but happens you want to do a clinical trial in it, then I am the person to start the conversation. Usually, sometimes I end up going all the way through and becoming a project officer, and sometimes it's handed off. So those are the two things that I do. NINDS has a couple of very interesting funding opportunity announcements. The first of importance to this group, it is a Siren-specific funding opportunity announcement, which means Siren, just to be clear, is funded by two institutes at 50-50, NINDS and Heart, Lung, and Blood. So it's interested in those areas. NINDS put out a Siren-specific funding opportunity announcement calling for studies in the emergency department using this funding opportunity announcement. So, but it's in the neurological area. You can't ask NINDS to fund your infectious disease thing. They won't do that, right? So if you have a study, if you think it's neurologically based, you can go in through this funding opportunity announcement, a special Siren FOA. You can also use other existing announcements. We have an exploratory announcement for early sort of phase 1, 2. We have an efficacy announcement, which is really phase 3, 4, and you can come in and use those. So again, if you don't know where to start, I'm happy to try and help you. If you have a good relationship, good for you. And if you have trials that you think you want to really understand, then I'm the person to do that at NINDS. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Our next program officer is Dr. Kristen Huntley. And I'll start the slideshow as soon as you're ready. Dr. Huntley is a health scientist administrator at the National Institutes of Health, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, or NIDA, the Center for the Clinical Trials Network, where she serves as the scientific officer for multi-site clinical research projects studying the effectiveness and implementation of interventions for the treatment of substance abuse disorders. Dr. Huntley co-leads NIDA's Dissemination and Implementation Science Interest Group, provides leadership for selected projects conducted through the NIDA CTN Dissemination Initiative, and is the NIDA CCTN contact for research conducted in emergency medicine settings. During her tenure at NIH, Dr. Huntley has served as a scientific review officer at NIDA and as a program director at the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. Prior to working at NIH, Dr. Huntley was on the faculty of Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, a project director at a market research firm, and worked as a psychologist in a variety of community and medical settings. Dr. Huntley has a PhD in clinical psychology and has over 25 years of experience in academic research and clinical settings. Let me start this for you.
Okay, thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's terrific to be here today, and I'm very aware of the time, so I'm going to quickly go through these. Please give me a signal if I need to hurry and wind it up. Thanks for that kind introduction. I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. The National Institute on Drug Abuse, or NIDA, is the lead federal agency supporting scientific research on drug use and its consequences. Our mission is to advance the science on the causes and consequences of drug use and addiction, and to apply that knowledge to improve individual and public health. Our strategic plan has 5 priority scientific areas ranging from basic science and understanding drugs, the brain, and behavior to translating that research into innovative health applications. We have a terrific SBIR program. Our group in the OTIPI office has really done some innovative work to highlight our programs and develop training for academicians to help them bring their research to the field. So check that out if you have any interest in product development or developing applications for use in clinical settings. Within each priority area, the strategic plan describes 7 cross-cutting themes, ranging from training the next generation of scientists to leveraging data science and developing personalized interventions informed by people with lived experience. We've been very busy the past several years with the NIH Helping to End Addiction Long-Term, or HEAL initiative. This is a trans-agency effort to speed solutions to address the overdose crisis, with over $500 million a year in research funding supporting hundreds of projects across the institutes and centers of NIH, addressing the epidemic through understanding, managing, and treating pain, and improving treatment for opioid misuse and addiction. And these funds can also now be used to address stimulant use disorder. NIDA considers research in emergency care settings to be a very high priority because many patients go through emergency departments for care. So a number of divisions at NIDA are supporting research in this area. The NIDA Clinical Trials Network has a relatively large portfolio of projects in emergency care settings. The NIDA CTN is a network comprised of 16 nodes or main sites. Each node has numerous affiliated clinics and research sites. They can also very quickly engage additional sites as research needs arise. We have a clinical coordinating center and a data and statistics center to support research conducted through the network. This slide lists some recent and ongoing CTN emergency care research projects. I'm not going to read this list, but topics range from studying peer recovery support to bridge overdose survivors to treatment, to large studies such as CTN 99 or ED Innovation, which is a multi-site study which implemented buprenorphine programs in 29 sites across the country and is evaluating daily sublingual buprenorphine and comparing this with a weekly injectable formulation. This is being led by Gail D'Onofrio and David Feline. And a number of these sites are Siren Network sites as well. This slide highlights some other NIDA ED studies. The CTN studies are just a part of NIDA's work in this area. We support a wide range of topic areas, ranging from developing medications for the treatment of life-threatening cocaine intoxication to research studying cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. We're supporting projects looking at decision-making in the ED. Again, these slides are available for you to look at a later date if you want to do a deeper dive. The next few slides highlight some of our funding opportunities. We have a number of notices of special interest that have been published. NIDA is interested in research on health services and economic research on treatment of drug, alcohol, and tobacco use disorders. We're interested in studying workforce interventions, leveraging data science, and research on cannabis. We're also very interested in prevention research. The ED is an ideal location for prevention interventions. Addressing stigma in healthcare settings is another priority area. Again, data science is a high priority. We're interested in studying the use of telemedicine and other remote-based platforms to support treatment for substance use disorders. And we have a number of racial equity initiatives that have been published. NIDA is interested in developing digital therapeutics and studies for system-level implementation of prevention and treatment services. I want to give a shout out to the NIDA CTN Dissemination Initiative Award Program. ACEP, SAEM, and EMF have been collaborators in recent years for this. This is a program that provides funds for a mentored experience for a dissemination project. It's not research, but some really innovative and exciting projects have been funded through this. And also the NIDA Diversity Scholars Network is a terrific program. The application deadline for this has passed for this year, but please keep this on your radar for next year. Another hot topic at NIDA is pre-hospital treatment for opioid use disorder. We held a meeting, the CTN had a meeting last year on this topic, and we're very interested in research in this space. Our investigators have been proactive about developing resources for clinicians. This slide shows some examples of resources that are available out there. The California Bridge website has great resources, as does the Yale School of Medicine and ACEP Equal Network Opioid Initiative website. And I'll also mention ACEP has been incredibly proactive in developing the pain and addiction care in the ED accreditation program. Resources are also available through the CMS quality improvement organizations. And I just also want to use this opportunity to advertise that NIDA Center for the Clinical Trials Network is recruiting 2 program officers. So please talk to me afterward if you have an interest and want to learn more about this type of position. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Huntley. Our next program officer is going to be Dr. Cinnamon Dixon. And Dr. Cinnamon Dixon is a medical officer at the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. As a board-certified pediatric emergency medicine physician within the Pediatric Trauma and Critical Illness branch, Dr. Dixon oversees the PTCIB research and training portfolio related to emergency medical and trauma services for children, pediatric unintentional injury and trauma control, and pediatric disaster science. Prior to joining the NICHD, Dr. Dixon was an academic physician scientist whose research interests focused on unintentional injury prevention, mobile health intervention, development and testing, global health and quality improvement, and human-animal interactions. Her extensive global health experiences span the fields of medical education, advocacy, research, and medical care. She has served as a pediatric injury consultant to the WHO and other national organizations, helping to build capacity for global child injury control. She has experience conducting research and providing medical care in both the United States and in low and middle income countries. She continues to provide clinical care to children. Let me just pull up these slides. Oh, I think my mouse went to the other screen here. See if I can bring it back. Oh, here it is. Okay, and then this is your pointer and advancer if you like.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. All right, well, thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to be here today. I'm delighted to be here with colleagues I've never met. The NIH is huge. I've only been there for 2 years, and every day I meet new folks, and so it's really a fun place to work. So I am just going to be sharing a little bit about our institute, the NICHD, or the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, our pediatric trauma and critical illness branch, and some of the science that we're interested in supporting. So I have no disclosures. First, the NICHD, with the terrific help of Eunice Kennedy Shriver in 1962, was founded. Eunice Kennedy Shriver was sister of then President JFK. It was officially renamed in 2007 in honor of Ms. Shriver for her extreme support and advocacy for this Institute for Children and Maternal Health to become the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. So hence why you often see that in front of our title, unlike some of my other IC colleagues. It is one of the institutes at the NIH. There are 27 institutes and centers for those who are not familiar. Its overarching mission is to lead research and training that's related to human development, clearly improve reproductive health, and certainly to enhance the lives of children and adolescents and optimize abilities for all. Because it is one of the only institutes that focuses on the whole lifespan as opposed to a specific organ or a specific disease or condition, its vision is healthy pregnancies, healthy children, and healthy and optimal lives. I've listed 5 strategic plan themes that are current, and the ones that are most relevant probably to this audience are those of theme 4, improving child and adolescent health and transition to adulthood, and then theme 5, those are not in order, advancing safe and effective therapeutics and devices for the populations that we have interest in. The Pediatric Trauma and Critical Illness branch is one of 12 extramural branches that fund science in our institute. Our mission is to essentially help to support science and training that prevent and reduce all forms of childhood trauma, injury, and critical illness, and notably across the continuum of care. So that's in the community, into the hospital, and out back to the community. Our vision ultimately is, again, to have reduced forms and aspects of all childhood trauma, injury, and critical illness, and hopefully to affect the well-being of all children and families and society at large. I have, the next 3 slides really just have a quick screenshot of the website updates that we have, and these are changing regularly, and goodness knows it could be changing today. The 3 that are most probably relevant to this group are our EMSC and disaster management programs. And I'm not going to go through every single bullet, and you probably can't even read them. But notably, again, our EMSC, which is Emergency Medical Services for Children program, aims to fund science that in the pre-hospital setting, in the ED setting, and in the hospital setting. And certainly that can be basic science, that can be discovery, interventions, it can be surveillance, it can be D&I science, community engaged research, and more. We are also hoping to foster a relatively nascent field of pediatric disaster science, which looks at all stakeholders who potentially need to be involved in the transdisciplinary integrated research that happens in disasters, and certainly in the preparedness, response, and recovery space in the disaster phases of management. The second programs that would be of interest to this group is largely in our pediatric injury and trauma programs. This clearly is unintentional injury, the leading killers such as motor vehicle crashes, drowning, falls, burns, poisoning, as well as our psychological trauma, traumatic stress, violence, and child maltreatment programs. Clearly, this spans all translational research from T0 to T4, and so we're very excited about this work. And I'll just highlight two specific notice of special interest that came out recently, the first being on research in drowning prevention. For those who are not familiar, drowning has been the leading cause of children ages 1 to 4 for almost 3 decades in the US, and one of the leading causes globally, and yet very little science is being done in this space. So if you're interested, please look at this NOCI or contact me. Another is a recent NOCI that was put out on the impact of child sexual abuse on gynecological health and disease. And then finally, the third program that I wanted to share was our pediatric critical care program, which clearly looks at the pathophysiology of critical care and management of critical illness in the ICU setting, but also we have an aspect of our program that looks at ethical, translational, applied research. And then we're starting to reach into the hospitalized child science space. So if you have colleagues that are in hospital medicine, have them reach out to us, and also palliative care. And so with that, I hope that you have seen the breadth and scope of some of the work that we are interested in supporting. We like to call ourselves small but mighty. We only have a few POs, but we're doing what we believe is some of the most important work at NIH for our next generation of children. So thanks so much.
Get my slides ready. Okay. Next up, we have Dr. Wang, who is the Director of the Office of Research Training and Career Development at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. His office oversees a portfolio of fellowships, career development awards, and institutional training grants. Since 2020, he also serves as the NHLBI Training Program Director, where he provides strategic direction, coordination, and collaborative leadership across NHLBI extramural training and career development activities to support the next generation of HLBS researchers.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the organizers, including Dr. Vogel and Moore, for inviting me here. This is, I think, my 4th time here at SAEM, and it's always a pleasure to be here and work with junior investigators. So as you heard in my intro, my background is a little bit different than we heard. I don't do the large clinical trials. My office and what I do at NHLBI is solely focused on working with junior investigators to train the next generation of researchers. So like the other speakers, I'm going to start with the mission of NHLBI. So our mission is to provide global leadership for research training and education programs to promote the prevention and treatment of heart, lung, blood diseases, and I should include sleep in there as well. I think my colleagues in sleep would be upset if I didn't throw their name in there, and enhance the health of all individuals. And to help implement this mission, as again, as we heard from our prior speakers, so we also have a strategic plan. So I just want to very briefly provide an overview of what our strategic plan looks like. So here we see 4 very, very broad overarching goals. And the only one I'll just mention here is just to develop workforce, because that's the area that I'm interested in. And under this umbrella of the 4 major goals, we have 8 specific strategic objectives. And the one I've highlighted in red is obviously is what I do at NHLBI, and that's to develop and diversify and sustain a scientific workforce capable of accomplishing the NHLBI's mission. I did want to highlight a few additional areas that I think are relevant to emerging care research, and those are the ones that are highlighted in blue. So for example, under strategic objective number 5, develop and optimize novel diagnostic and therapeutic strategies to prevent HLBS diseases. Number 6, optimize clinical and implementation research to improve health and reduce disease, as well as leveraging data science. So I think these are all areas that we're interested in and certainly align fairly well with emerging care research. Now, we have a lot of commitment. Again, like I said, my focus is going to be on training. So we've devoted quite a bit of our time and efforts to try to support emergency care research. Actually, we heard from Jane Scott earlier today. She was a keynote speaker. She was actually the director of this office prior to me becoming director. So you can get the sense of why we're so committed to emergency care research. So I'll start by mentioning the K-12 programs that not only Jane first launched when she was at NHLBI. So we've actually supported K-12 programs of emergency care research for a decade. We don't have any current active ones right now. They're not meant to be long-term sustainable training programs. But we have devoted NHLBI around $25 million to support junior investigators in emergency care research. And certainly with the second iteration of the K-12 program, just to give an example of some of the work that Jeremy's done, he really helped bring the second K-12 program to be a trans NIH program. So he helped bring in additional institutes to help support this K-12 program. So that's another great example of the important work that Jeremy does in his office. And so we have data on the first cohort of K-12s. That's published by Cindy Morris at OHSU, so that's available for all of you to look at. But just to briefly tell you, that's been an incredibly successful program. So all the scholars that went through the first 5 years of the K-12, from 2010 to 2015, nearly 70% have actually moved on to individual K awards as well as RPG. So incredibly successful program. We're very proud of that. And that's really has been important in helping establish that critical mass of new investigators in this field to really carry it forward. And we also have individual K awards, which I'll touch upon in just a second. Now, I mentioned that K-12s are not meant for long-term sustainability, so the other way to support institutional training is through T32s. And NHLBI has one of the largest efforts to support T32 programs. So on an annual basis, we devote about $100 million of our annual budget to support T32 programs. And I just wanted to highlight the Pittsburgh program in the Icahn School of Medicine. They were actually K-12 programs. So after the K-12 ended, they've now transitioned to T32 funding. So these are institutional grants that are really, really important. So you might be saying, well, it's only 3 on here. It's not that many. But I can tell you just a few years ago, if I showed you this slide, it'd be blank. And so, we're making progress slowly, but I know there are others here that are actually putting in applications already. I won't say who, but hopefully this list will grow in the coming years. And I just want to highlight some of the individual K awards that we've supported over the years as well. This is just a rough analysis that I put together. So this is looking at 2016 to 2022. In the blue, these are the number of applications that were received from PIs who are affiliated with emergency medicine departments. So you can see here in blue, those are the applications that received. Green are the ones that we funded. And over the course of this time, we've supported about 30 individual K awards, which I'm going to guess is probably one of the highest among NIH. So it's something we're very happy to see. And I think, I think part of our efforts since 2020, you can see the increase in the number of applications that we're getting. We hope to see that number grow in the coming years as well. But you can see the vast majority of the applications that we support for emergency care research are in the form of the K-23. And here are just some research examples of the K awards that I just mentioned that we funded. Take-home story here is that it's pretty obvious to tell what aligns with NHLBI. I've underlined some of the key words that makes it interest to our institute: myocardial infarction, hypertension, hemorrhage, asthma, cardiac arrest. I think you get the picture there. So you can always find out more information on these funded grants. So if those of you are not familiar, a great resource I just wanted to mention before I wrap up is the NIH Reporter website. I don't know how many of you actually use this website, but it's actually a great resource to see what different ICs are funding. So basically, any grant NIH funds is going to be available for you to look at. So you can actually see the specific aim page, you can see the abstract. And one of the questions we get a lot in training is that, NIH is so big, and we heard that before, who's the program officer I should find? I'm lost. So this is a great way to kind of see where you should start your search. So if you put in your aims, for example, or your abstract, you can see which ICs are actually funding similar research to yours. And then you can see which study sections they're on, what type of grants, or whether they're Ks or R01 grants. You get all that information in NIH Reporter. And I've highlighted in the bottom figure there, it's a little bit hard to see, so I put that nice big red arrow. There's a tab that says Program Officer. So you can look at any grant, and you can find which program officer is actually overseeing the type of research that you're interested in. So that'd be a good way for you to kind of start your search in terms of talking to a program officer. And from a training perspective, I'll just wrap by saying I can't stress how important it is to talk to a program officer. I think particularly for emergency care research, because if you look at the way the NIH is set up, we heard there are 27 ICs and centers. We have heart, lung, blood, we have cancer. They're all aligned to disease and organs. Last time I checked, there's no National Institute of Emergency Medicine, right? And so what you do and what you see in the EM setting it could align with a lot of different ICs. And we have that discussion a lot with a lot of people who reach out to us. So it's really important for you to know which IC is the right home. Certainly use NIH Reporter, but more importantly, talk to a program officer. And I'll wrap up there. You're always welcome to email me or any of the members of my team, and we'll be happy to help you. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's a little bit of a hazard.
You can just keep my intro to a few sentences.
Oh,
Remember what I
sure.
said.
Okay. Well, our last program officer is Dr. Atkins, who is actually going to give us a little bit of a perspective of federal funding outside of the NIH. Dr. Atkins has been the director of the VA's Health Services Research and Development Service since 2013. And he is focused on improving the health and care for our nation's veterans. For much of 2016, he served as the VHA's acting chief research and development officer, overseeing all 4 research services in the Office of Research and Development. And I'll let you.
Thanks. And I am not an emergency medicine physician. I was reminded of Mark Twain's saying, "It's nice to be among friends, even if they're not your own." So I'm hoping to grow the number of friends in here. So how many of you have a VA affiliation? Good. So we have some. Excuse me. One of my phones is going off. So the good news is that emergency medicine is a growing area of interest for us. And so we had a state-of-the-art conference a year ago to bring our partners together to talk about what our priorities should be in this new area. And we highlighted 3 areas that are of particular interest to the VA. That's emergency care for older veterans, emergency care of mental health conditions, and the use of community emergency care. The thing to know about the VA is we have 170 hospitals. Mike, how many of those have full emergency departments? 110. So I think the unique advantage the VA has as a research program is we're an embedded research program in a healthcare system. So you can not only study an intervention, but you can then look at how to scale it across a complex healthcare system. And you can use the electronic health record data that we have going back for 2 decades to really look at variation in care and the association with outcomes. And so it's a unique advantage. Those of you who don't yet have a VA affiliation but are at a university that has a strong VA, I encourage you to think about VA as a place to pursue your interest in emergency medicine. You cannot apply for funding from us unless you have a VA appointment, but it's not as hard as it seems. And so if you have any interest, please reach out to me, and we can try to help you do that. So I just have 4 slides to go through some different funding opportunities that we have. So we have 2 funding cycles a year as opposed to NIH. We have our IO1 equivalent, which has a 4-year, $1.2 million maximum, and we have an IO3 equivalent, which is 18 months and $200,000. Although we are a relatively small research program, the Health Services Research Program is $120 million. We've been able to maintain reasonably good funding rates during the time that I've been here. So it's a good place to get funding if you have an idea that fits with our priorities. The other thing to know is that we have a bunch of other mechanisms in order to get your first leg up. And these are mechanisms that have shorter cycles for application and review. You don't have to go through 1 or 2 revisions in order to get funding. And they're a way to get some experience with VA data and working with VA partners. So we have funded some national research consortia across the VA on some of our high priority areas. And these include suicide, pain and opioids, community care, and virtual care, which includes telehealth and use of apps. And all of those, as you've heard, have applications to emergency medicine. And so if you have interest in any of those areas, these consortia are a place to connect to a national network of researchers, find out what's going on, find out what our partners are interested in. And then they regularly have opportunities to apply for small seed funding on the order of $30,000 to $50,000 to get some initial data to support applications for funding. And those are relatively short applications, reviewed and funded in a couple of months. So it's a great way to try to get an idea off the ground. We also have a mechanism working with our clinical partners in emergency medicine called Researcher in Residence. And that's a way that we can fund a researcher to work with a clinical program office to work in their data, answer specific questions. Often it's a question about evaluating a new program, to see how well something has worked. And it's a way to build partnership with the clinical side and to find out their priorities. And that's something I want to really emphasize about the VA in health services research. We are very much about working with our clinical partners to find answers to questions that they care about. So, and the idea that way when you have research findings, you have somebody who is ready to take it and actually apply it into practice. And so it's something that's quite different for people who are used to, applying for investigator-initiated research, especially on the NIH side. But it's something that makes, I think, the work, it's made my job the best job I've had. It makes your work interesting. And the key is it gives you a chance to actually see your work get into practice. And so these are opportunities that get put out 3 to 4 times a year. And we've had at least one, if not more, related to emergency medicine. And one of our clinical partners is over there. And I'm sure they're always thinking about how to get help from the smart researchers in the room. And then lastly, we have another mechanism. Again, these are for very small seed projects that you can apply for. And again, once a year, but these are relatively short applications and are reviewed. If you are associated with one of our 18 centers of innovation, they're reviewed within those centers. And so you should work with those centers to put in your idea. If you're not, we have a mechanism where you can apply separately for independent funding. And I think that's it. So thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to open up the floor for questions. And right before I do that, just wanted to put a plug in for a couple other events that we have with our program officers. After this, we're having one-on-one sessions, which required prior sign-up. But at 3:30, there's going to be a mixer. And so if you want to have any questions that you want to ask privately or that we don't get to during this session, please come back at 3:30. So if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you.
Suggest that I am submitting a grant and I'm concerned about the expertise on the study section. How do I make sure there is an emergency medicine physician or two that would get my grant to review? Do I just call you, Jeremy, and ask you, can you please make that happen? Or do I ask someone else?
Thanks, Jim. Okay, thank you. So the answer is on the PHS form that you submit, there is a piece at the bottom, I think it is, that asks you, number one, to name your enemies, the people you do not want to review your grant. And if you're the kind of person that has those kind of enemies, name them, because they won't be able to give you an objective review. And the kind of people, you can actually name them by name. You can't say, I don't want any neurologists on this. And then there's a place to say the kind of specialist that you would want. I need a pediatric neurologist for this reason. And the program officers, that's these guys here, you can also, in your discussion with them, and really don't apply to NIH for anything unless you've discussed it first. We're here to make your life easy and save you headaches. They will also help. And what I do, if I am told by people that they are looking for an EM person, I will then contact the review people and say, introduce myself and say, I can help find you an ER, this kind of person. And they're busy people, so they're very happy to let me do that. And so that's how you would do it and really take advantage of it. If you need an expert, ask for that expert person.
Any other questions? I have a couple loaded up for kind of general ideas, unless anybody has anything. Oh, go ahead.
Dr. Brown, can you talk just a little bit about the K-12 in neurological emergencies?
Yes, sure. So we announced, I think it was in the last few days, a national K-12 in emergency neurology. The K-12 is a training program. Wayne spoke about the really amazing and successful program that went through Heart, Lung, and Blood that involved 2 rounds, and in the second round it involved a couple of other institutions that were supporting positions in their specialties. So the K-12 is a training program. It can either be at a local hospital, which is the five or so that were funded, or 7 first time and 5, whatever it was. You had to be there. This is a national program, meaning you can do it from wherever you happen to be living and working. And the idea is that there will be a principal investigator. That is the person who applies to run the post, the thing. And then that person will get a team of sort of committee members who will help all together then choose the applicants for the K-12. And the K-12 is in emergency neurology. So if you or a friend or a loved one has an interest in emergency neurology and you want to get specialized training in it, then you would perhaps apply to this national K-12, and if accepted, you would have basically a tailor-made program of research, of education, and of conferences. If you want to get a sense of what this looks like, then you can Google the NINDS K-12 in neurosurgery. There is an existing one. It takes a few neurosurgeons from all around the country. It's led by one neurosurgeon at one place. And that's the idea. That's what we're going to do here. So the T32s are really important programs. And we should probably spend longer on those. But that's what the K-12 is. So if any of you would like to apply to be the PI of the K-12 program, or alternately, if you would like, in probably a year or so, to be a what's the right word? A fellow? A scholar. Scholar's better than a fellow. Then please do look out for that. And it's another really good opportunity to help train emergency medicine folk in a specific niche.
Thank you. One more question?
Yeah, since you brought up the T32 question, let me just ask a specific about T32s. What's the common mistakes that you see with T32 applications, especially since I'm fixing to submit one? And I'd like to avoid all of them.
So I think that depends. Is this on? So I think it depends on which IC you're applying to, because one of the things about T32s and Ks, they're reviewed in-house. They're not reviewed by CSR. So different ICs have slightly different standards. So talk to your program officer. I'm going to default to that answer. But probably the most common mistake for new programs is not having, I mean, there are myriad of different problems with T32s. It could be too diffuse. It could be not a strong mentoring pool or preceptor pool. It could be not enough of a strong training pool. I mean, there's so many potential problems. I don't think there's one most common for T32s. Unlike for a K, I think the most common is cookie cutter career development plan. I mean, that's probably the most common mistake I see for Ks. For Ts, for NHLBI, it really does vary. And for us, we work pretty closely with our T32 directors or applicants to try to figure out what the reviewers are looking for in our panel. I think that's probably the best way to address that. And what are our expectations? Because you have the group dynamics in review, right? You have one review panel. They like to see certain things. You go to another IC, it's a completely different set of reviewers. They might want to see something totally different. So it's a little bit hard to say. Talk to your program officer.
If I could just add something. So do you know somebody who has submitted a successful T32? Do you have a buddy who has one in the pocket? In-house. So you should literally be looking at their research and don't get it original, get it right. So don't, right? So that's what you should, and that's true of anybody who wants to apply for a grant in general. Find somebody who's successfully applied for that grant even if it is nothing to do with your area. When I first applied to NIH for an R01, and I had no idea what an R01 was, I wrote to somebody who I barely knew, who had got a research R01 funding for progesterone in traumatic head injury, and my study was on tamsulosin in renal colic. Nothing to do with each other. But he sent me the grant very kindly and generously, and I copied it, not copied the grant, but I understood what goes where. So, Jim, you need to get hold of a couple of funded T32s, and I would really recommend sort of bouncing off of that rubric if it would help.
Yeah, just going to my comment earlier about, each IC might want something different. For example, one of the things that NHBL reviewers like, for example, is the integration of Mentor the Mentors program. I don't know if that's the same for all ICs because, like I said, different study sections might not prioritize. For us, that's something that comes up quite a few times. They want to see how you can develop the next generation of mentors for that T32 program. We want to see a good distribution of junior, mid-career, and senior faculty. Do we have for us, for NHLBI, because we're very, very supportive of physician scientist training, do you have physician scientists incorporated into that program? If you're just training PhDs, sometimes you're going to get a little bit of a worse score because we do emphasize training of physician scientists. So again, it really varies on which IC, but there's so many different factors that go into it. And like I said, talking to a program officer for an HLBI, we can take you through the steps of what our reviewers generally look for and help kind of guide you in terms of writing your revision.
All right. I think we might have to turn this room over for our next one-on-one sessions, but thank you so much to all of our program officers for participating, and thank you all for joining.